Well, hey, Allan.
How you doing, Allan?
Allan, this is Ed. I think you guys have met before. We are, well, kind of in the middle of starting our Growing Young conversation and plans here in Ohio. And so just wanted to get us all talking and connected. Ed, I know you had some questions as we're starting to move out.
Yeah, so it's nice to finally just talk to you again. It was nice meeting you in Kahara, but just some of the direction we're going. We'd love to hear your feedback and your thoughts as we're planning and praying about moving towards Growing Young here in Ohio.
So let me start off as this is an important preface because I think it's actually a paradigm shift for us in youth and young adult ministry. Because much of what we've done in youth and young adult ministry has been extracurricular to local church life. We're great at Pathfinder camporees, even to a certain degree. The retreats and camp meetings that we hold are a reprieve from the desolate, anemic experience of week by week involvement in the local church. So in the ways by which we've perpetuated a modernistic frame of youth and young adult ministry does silos, and those silos will let you have one or two great events that you could go to outside in the woods, in a convention center, at a concert. But then after that experience, or even after, if we wanted to use the paradigm of Adventist education, we have this enriched, shall we say, spiritual smorgasbord where if you went to Kettering, there's 5 different choices in regards to what young adults could do, or in an academy where there's a chaplain and there's a spiritual week of prayer where young people are involved from tip to toe, only to have them graduate from college or graduate from high school into the desolation that is our local church landscape, where people are holding tightly to the reins of territorial power. The beauty of Growing Young is actually it's a proactive next step to us doing what any academician should do. We should define the problem, and we actually, with the help of Kasper and others, we've been defining the problem for the past half century. Right. So you don't have to be that old to know that Value Genesis and Roger Dudley and since the 60s, my friends, we've been defining the problem. Right. But now we're seeing this tip. So I'm using that as a preface here just to let you know that I love Growing Young in that it switches the research question to not being what is the problem, but who is finding answers.
Right.
And so much like many of us loved the book Growing Up Adventist, we love the positive Adventist stories. We love the stories of successes. We love looking in the mirror and seeing ourselves photoshopped in our own minds. So the turn of the question is good because it creates a good momentum for engagement with the local churches. But for many of us that are in youth and young adult ministry, it's a no-brainer that warm community will attract people. This is not rocket science, my friends. This is like a new revelation. However, our capability with the research to gently walk through this to equip our congregations is really a powerful turning point, and I think is a crucial tipping point for Ohio Conference. So I'd be interested in what your questions are, just so that I can be very specific. Okay. As you can see, I have no lack of word count in regards to me talking about this.
Coming from pastor into youth and young adult ministry, one of my goals is not to put stuff on the pastor's plate or to take youth and young adults out of their churches, but to provide support and mentoring into their churches.
Sure.
So in that aspect, the reason we're bringing it to the church, to the pastors, is so that at least they're on the radar screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so they know what's going on, and that they know that when their young adults are speaking this language, they understand it somewhat.
Well, let me offer some annotation to what your plans are for March and April.
Yeah.
And from there, if there's some questions that you have, I'm happy to address them. And you all are aware that we did bring a group of about 15 folks. It turned out to be over 30 that got certified speaking certification with Growing Young. Again, the idea of cohorts is not a new idea. They didn't give us some type of incantation to fix all of the churches there. But we were able to talk with the researchers, had a great time. And also it gives us a template to take a look at, which I'm going to be sharing with you, kind of the way that we're approaching it here in the conference, okay? So number one, I think it is brilliant and it's super important for you to have this meeting with Jake and with your pastors, as well as whatever conference administration and so forth can be there, okay? I think it's important as a learning moment and a growing moment for us to give the aha moment that we need to move out of our silos and develop not only intergenerational relationships, but also interdepartmental relationships.
All right.
So I definitely heard what you're saying, Ed, in regards to the idea that this is something that, maybe Ron can't be the champion of, but we cannot underestimate the power and the influence of the president.
Right.
So to the degree that the president and the ministerial director and whatever other departmental directors are working collaboratively is a very positive thing. If this falls onto your mantle to be your thing to champion, then I think it's doomed for limited success.
Right. Yeah.
Because it moves everyone back into their silos and they say, oh, well,
it's just one of their stuff.
Yeah, Pastor Ed's going to take care of it, and they'll have another great camporee with fireworks and this moment after communion, and we'll go through the spiritual roller coaster again. So I think it's very important for your pastors to be what I've called the resident expert on Growing Young. In other words, with Jake coming there, sharing the research straight from Fuller Seminary, for them to do Q&A, for him to give them all 6 of the commitments, and to lay that out over your ministerial meeting is a brilliant move, because all of a sudden you've now equipped the pastor to be the local resident expert on Growing Young. Now that's important because he has to be bought in. He or she has to be bought in. If she or he is not bought in, then this will not only fall off the radar, but it can potentially become a point of antagonism with the pastor, because the pastor has his own agenda thing that he wants to do, okay? So I think it's important to have that meeting with the pastors. However, I do think in ramping towards that meeting, you really need to create a longitudinal strategy. For us, as we kind of mimicked and we're templating it based on the Growing Young cohort, after this meeting with your key leaders, your pastors in other words, and again, to whatever degree there are other departmental directors that are coming and fully engaged with that process is really beneficial to you. I recommend having some type of highlight or feature training that allows the pastors to send church teams to some type of training. Okay. So I think it's great that you have a young adult retreat. Quite honestly, most of our young adults are in how should we say it? In defining their relationship with the church, they are mildly dating or just simply acquainted. Okay? So I'm fairly reluctant to send young adults into the local church setting, because oftentimes it's already toxic and we have too many adults that are holding on to power. This brand new young professional that's beautiful or handsome coming in and saying, we're going to do this with the church, until the church becomes a little more inoculated to Growing Young, it's a difficult road to hoe. However, at your young adult retreat, because they are building community, it's a great opportunity to start praying over the churches. It's a great opportunity to acquaint them to the ways by which, many of them are involved in some way with the local church.
Right.
So the degree to which they are acquainted with the core commitments and the degree to which they are already helping to foster that with the entire church is a good thing. Okay. I would not look towards your young adult retreat as your launching point into going into local churches or sending teams. I would look for that to be an intergenerational gathering of some sort, much like you were talking about having in Dayton and in some other areas.
Regionally. So
regionally.
For the young adult retreat, my initial thought was, and what we do at our young adult retreat in the past is we don't really concentrate on a speaker as much as networking and dialoguing. And then so for our young adult retreat, we wanted to have Ben come in, speak to the young adults Friday night, Saturday morning, and then have Ron talk to the elders and leaders of churches to come down for Saturday afternoon.
Nice.
And then it would be this intergenerational where probably Ben would have taken the time to prep or gear the young adults towards that too. Sure. And have this intergenerational dialogue going on. And now you have the young adults and older members together in one place. So that's kind of the idea of this. So this retreat would be much different than previous retreats.
I love it.
I'm not sure if it will get the same amount of kids out, but that's the idea.
No, I love that. No, the thing that you know, based on everyone's strong suit, Ben can certainly do a spiritually focused retreat for you, but he has done considerable work in regards to working with young adults in leadership development.
Yeah.
To the degree to which there is a spiritual theme that looks at leadership development and carrying on a mantle further in regards to mentoring and that type of thing. His work on his overflow model has been very, very well received by summer camps. He continues to do that. In fact, we are having Guadalupe Montour and Ben Lundquist speak for our two Growing Together summits that we're holding in the aftermath of our pastor's retreat. Okay. So our pastor's retreat was held this summer. Mm-hmm. We are now in follow-up. We announced at the pastor's retreat that these two summits are coming up, one in September and one in October, held much like you're thinking conceptually in different regional portions of Texas.
Okay.
So that we can have training, but this training gives the pastor two options. Number one, it's required to be an intergenerational team of 4, okay?
Yeah.
So he or she can be a part of that team, or because he's now the resident expert and it will be simply a reiteration of what he's already learned, he can certainly send an elder and a young adult and a youth leader and the youth pastor. But this intergenerational team, he can send them so that it doesn't end up being another thing that he has to go to or she has to go to if they don't want to, okay? So that summit is what we're doing. We announced, it's fresh in the minds of the pastors when Jake presented. We shared the promotional for the summits, and right now we're in the phase of recruiting and promoting those summits in the aftermath of the retreat. I will share this with you too as something to consider. It's very helpful in my personal opinion, and Jake's been able to work that out for us here in the Texas Conference. They have an instrument called the Growing Young Assessment. I think you may have heard of it.
Okay.
He's able to provide you a comparable discount rate so that your pastors, in preparing for your upcoming meeting, can take it prior to the meeting so that they can actually share an assessment of where they feel their churches are.
Okay.
So you did this before your pastor's meeting.
That's right. So we had our conference president send out a note to all the pastors prior to coming to the ministers' meeting. Please complete this assessment. It's online. It's all automated.
Yeah.
It will provide them personal information in regards to their assessment.
Yeah.
So it's going to really provoke them in regards to how they feel about their church. And really, this is you just looking in the mirror. So this is not someone telling you that this is what you should do. This is you telling the assessment, this is how I feel about my church and how we rank in regards to the 6 core commitments. Okay? But what's beautiful about it and what's really powerful is that with their research team at Fuller Youth Institute, they can take the aggregate of the pastor's responses and give you a landscape look at the Ohio Conference.
Okay.
And so that's really helpful. We thought it was, in fact, right now we're getting the finalization of that report for the Texas conference.
Mm-hmm.
And if the pastors are honest, it's not a good picture.
So let me ask you this. Is this helpful to have in database to, let's say we want to do this again 7 years from now and see if we have actually done a dent into this?
Yeah, it would make for, it could certainly make for a good pre-post based on the pastors.
Yeah.
The only thing that obviously you would need to do is you need to have some way to make sure you're investigating the same pastors. Right. So, to the degree that anonymity affords pastors the ability to be really honest about their churches,
right.
As opposed to shining them up and oh yeah, we're doing really great. So to the degree that there is benefit to it, and even if it's a little bit dirty, like say for instance, you do a pre-post, you do a post 4 years from now in regards to the entire pastoral team at Ohio Conference, it can kind of tell you where the conference sees itself in regards to the commitments. Yeah. And certainly can make for a good demon project for someone that wants to spend the time.
Right.
Yeah. So in my mind, that's a great thing. Number one, great thing that you're bringing the pastors on first, because they need to be, they need to be the experts. Yeah. Number two, I think that the assessment's a great tool. Number three, at that ministers' meeting, if you announce what's coming up the pike, I think it's great. I love your conceptualization in regards to the retreat. I think that the retreat, and this is the part I would be careful of, because I've seen ourselves get into this rut just because we've seen it before. Yeah. The let's talk, and there's something on in all of these places. It's young adults asking. It's more of a town hall meeting than it is really a listening session. I think that of the different versions of this that I've seen done, what Tracy Wood did in Ohio Conference with the 180 symposiums was probably the most successful. Now I know this is named the same as the CYE, but it's different, okay? But in that your elders or other people may be coming to your retreat, I would personally make some strategic efforts to prep your elders to be listeners.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then as opposed to there being a panel of pastors and presidents and elders up on stage to which young people ask questions, I think that there's some real power to giving confidentiality and authenticity permission to young adults and having them be on the panel to tell their stories and have elders listen and ask very non-judgmental, open-ended questions. So it does take a little bit of orchestration, but I don't believe that young adults are any more impressed by where people say they are on the women's ordination issue by asking that in a Q&A time during the Sabbath afternoon of their retreat. However, there was some real powerful components, and there's a quote that we use oftentimes in the presentations we do, offered by Scott Cormode, that leadership begins with listening. Mm-hmm. And so if your elders are of that posture so they can empathize with where young people are, it's a great illustration of one of the core commitments. Yeah. Again, this is not rocket science. We know this, However, the opportunity for your young adults to feel heard by leadership in our local churches can be a really great opportunity for bonding and even to a certain degree reconciliation. At the presentations I made at the ministers' meetings in Oregon many years ago when they did these 180 symposiums, Tracy had basically gone to the various territories of Oregon and brought his conference president along and gave the young adults permission to basically be on the panel, to answer a couple of orchestrated questions as part of that panel. And one of the best imageries I have in my mind, at least for when I was presenting to the ministers, is basically there is this room filled with pastors and their family, pastors and their spouses. They brought in a set of about 5 or 6 young adults to be on stage, and Tracy was up there kind of navigating the questions that they were being asked. And up there as well was Al Remke, who was the president at that time. And he was furiously with 2 of his fingers on his iPad taking notes as the young adults were speaking.
Yeah.
At the end of it, although it was very spontaneous and maybe it was a little bit of an encroachment, some of the young adults shared very candidly their experience. We had a season of prayer over them just because the whole group was so moved by their authenticity and the realities of where they had been hurt in their relationship with the church. So, yeah, I think that your idea for the retreat is fabulous. I love that Ben's coming over there. I would share with you one of his strong suits is leadership development, and to the degree that he integrates that into that to equip the young adults and empower them, in addition to his spiritual inspiration, can be very helpful. And then further, if you do indeed plan to have elders come in the afternoon, my only admonition to you is don't turn it into a panel of elders and conference officials, to which, don't get me wrong, I think it's great that we're doing the is this thing on where Dan and Alex are going around, but the questions, quite honestly, have not changed since Jan Paulsen.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
You have the answers much, but yeah. So what I'm looking at is we can call from your discussion here as maybe 5 phases or 5 sections of it. One is, it'd be well if we can have Ron to do with the pastors a Growing Young assessment with Jake. Have that before March.
That's right.
Get that rolled out, then have the March pastors meeting, let them know about the upcoming April, have that as a listener session, and then we could, from there, that April could gear off the regional. Hey, this is just a launch. We're not doing this, but and then once those regional trainings are, the goal is that those that are gaining the regional trainings, they go back to their churches, and from there, they try to bring it alive. And then when we consistently keep up with them regionally, they tell us, this is not working, this is working, we're not being heard, this is the challenges, so that we help them go through that field mind.
Yeah. Well, this is what I will share with you, because I think that the timeline that's developing for you is very robust, is that after those regional trainings, what we did with Fuller was those regional trainings on, and we're event and convention junkies as Adventists, okay? The part that I thought was really beneficial, and we're templating it based on what we're doing here too. So when we do our Growing Together Summits, following the Growing Together Summits, we're going to have a series of periodic webinars and coachinars to follow that team. So the team comes to the event, they build momentum, enthusiasm. It's an event. We all get kind of high and a little drunk on gathering together and say, we're going to change the world. We're going to change the world. And then also we go home and we say, oh, the world doesn't want to change. Okay. Right. So, you have the teams that come to the event, which is your regional trainings. Okay. Following that, intentionally, for those that want it, you will now provide to them in their local settings a series of periodic, I would say either once a month or once every other month, of webinars and coachinars. Okay. The difference between the webinars and coachinars is the webinars are more in regards to general topics of follow-up. Yeah. And the coachinars are specific meetings they have with a specific coach or a series of coaches that you set for a cluster of your teams. Yes. That's to answer their questions, and much like what we're doing here on a more macro level, you would do it on a more micro level that's more contextualized to the local church. Right. Okay. So our intent is that we had the teachers, we had the pastors retreat, made the pastors acquainted with the content. I like your model actually better, because you actually not only meet with the pastors, but you also have a chance to meet with the young adults, which I think is great. It's fabulous. so that they become acquainted with what you're doing. Right. Then you're moving towards regional training, which we're calling in our context the Growing Together Summits. Mm-hmm. I'm recommending to you as part of your intentional plan there is to have subsequent post-event webinars and coachinars to help these teams as they're contextualizing it to their local setting, okay? And so in my mind, that would allow that team from, let's say, for instance, you have that in you have March, April, you're looking at May, June. Mm-hmm. So you're looking to provide them webinars and coachinars for roughly a year, okay? Right. Again, with technology, this is not hard to do, and nor does it need to be expensive. Yeah. It's just a matter of lining up people, and I would share with you that on growingyoungadventists.com, we have a series of certified speakers. So in addition to marquees, you could pull some other individuals that can speak to, whatever ethnic mix or whatever contextualization, urban or rural, that you need. We have a good diversity of folks for you to pick on, okay? The last thing I'll share with you on this, and I certainly want to answer any further questions that you have, and I know that we're already 2 minutes over, but I have time here. I'm on sabbatical, okay? I'm being serious here. I've dedicated my sabbatical to help us in this process of deploying this Growing Young Adventists into the local setting, including conferences and unions, okay? Part of the element here that I want to really emphasize is that this, because we're also, in addition to being event junkies, we tend to be initiative skeptical, because we've had the net events, we've had every other promotional themed event coming our way. So we're really talking here about cultural transformation, okay, in the local church. And that's why this is exciting beyond the realm of youth and young adults. It's because for churches that are lagging and are having a difficult time sustaining vitality in the local church setting, talking about this and developing this is really less about youth and young adult ministry, and it's really more about local church vitality and the vibrancy of local community life. And so the part that I want to share is twofold. Number one, for those churches that do not want to do Growing Young, we say that's perfectly fine. Yeah. There are churches that want to calcify. They don't like babies crying in the middle of their services. They like the prelude and the postlude where they are. They don't want to be warm because they've sat in that pew for their entire lives, and they don't want anyone else sitting in it. Right. For those churches, we say it's perfectly fine. You don't have to be involved with this. There's no obligation or requirement on anyone's part. Right. Okay? However, on the flip side of that, if there are churches that understand there is a problem, if there are parents and grandparents that recognize that not just half of the young people are gone and no longer attending their church, maybe there's no young people in their church, which is the case for many of our Adventist churches across the North American division, and they want to do something about it. Quite honestly, Growing Young for them is new stuff. Yeah. And it's revealing for them that they have a vital role in regards to what young people want and need based on what the research is telling us. Right. Different from the stereotype of the generation gaps, the millennials especially, and certainly I think it's going to continue on with Generation Z, are desperately wanting relationships of authenticity and depth with other generations. Right. Okay. And this is a powerful idea. Why is it powerful? Because number one, it not only affords young people the relationships they desperately want with older generations, but number two, it reestablishes for the adults that get it, that they have purpose, identity, and belonging in the church. We have not sold the entire church towards youth culture. They have an important mentoring and experience sharing role in the church. And for many of them, because they are coming up, the baby boomers are retiring, they're coming up with more discretionary time. As opposed to them holding on white-knuckled to being the head elder or the head deacon of their church, they can now begin to build legacy by passing on the key chains of leadership to the next generation and further expanding the influence of their ministry, as opposed to holding on and hoarding power by holding on to the keys of leadership in their church and thinking that that's the only way in this youth-saturated culture that they can have meaning. They can actually have meaning in a more biblical sense.
Right.
In Filipino culture, we used to have to go to lolas and lolos before we could even get married. You have to go to them for wisdom in regards to how to do your life. We have thrown that away typically in Western culture, but based on the research here, is now an opportunity for intergenerational relationships to take a more cohesive role in the local church.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it expands the pie for everyone.
Yeah.
But again, I want to share this as a precautionary tale. I think for a long period of time, especially during the baby boomer era, everyone was adamant that we're going to change all the churches. And it just made the older generations more rigid and more reluctant, and even to a certain degree antagonistic towards youth and young adult ministry. Because no, we're not going to have a drum in here. And oh, sure, we can have the orchestra come in and they can bring a snare drum and a timpani drum and a bass drum. But no way we're going to have it. We majored in the minors and created unnecessary conflicts. And so part of what I would say, just as a precautionary tale, is those churches that don't want growing young, they don't want to grow old, hey, we are not going to mess with your cheese. We're not going to move it.
Yes.
However, there are churches out there saying we are desperate because we see that we're dying. And it is in those places that if there is a willingness to create a long-term strategy for cultural transformation, it certainly is possible.
I appreciate that. Two last questions I have for you, and then we'll probably be able to let you go and enjoy other parts of your sabbatical. But one of them deals with, I've noticed as I go into the region, some of these young adult leaders or youth leaders, one of the things they're missing is just flat out resources. They're asked to be in their position. They don't have money to buy their own resources, and the church doesn't want to provide resources. And so one of the things I've taken upon myself is to create some form of a library. It doesn't have to be with books, but some form, whether it's an e-library of resources that we could provide. So, I can say to my administration, hey, for this X amount of money, we can provide this great library. Any suggestions you have on maybe creating a resource library, what you've seen happen? Or
actually that's a great segue. What we've done with Growing Young Adventists, which is sponsored by your tithe dollars for the North American division, is we've recently debuted at growingyoungadventist.com. In addition to the human resources, which are our certified speakers, which Ben is a part of, and you can see the listing there of people to pick from. Number two, we've just recently released what we're calling our free resources blog page. Okay, all this stuff is being held there on the current site as work product, as the NAD is processing through their various committees, putting together the official site. But I can't wait for them. So you'll find on that site called Free Resources, hundreds of pages that are contextualized ministry tools for growing young, Adventist Christian Fellowship, and also the precursor to Growing Young Adventists, which is Next Steps. So there is all those resources that are there in one place. You can certainly take whatever you like off of there and create your own page germane to Ohio Conference, or you can direct them and route them to growingyoungadventist.com. Much of those resources are available. In addition, Ed, I will share with you that as you all get further along in this process, and I think I just added you to a Facebook Messenger thread that Kasper and I are a part of, is that oftentimes having hundreds of resources in one location is actually overwhelming. It's like being at the library without a Dewey Decimal System. So people say, oh yeah, I want that, I need that, but then they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, so they don't even go on it because it's
Yeah, so to the degree you do 2 clicks, you say, oh, wow, this is overwhelming and I don't know what to do with this. It's hard. However, the flip is actually beneficial, is that if you have a specific need and if there was a help desk that you could ask and say, hey, you know what, we're going to start a sermon series in our church, or we're going to do a book club. I'm wondering if there's a discussion guide or whatever. I've added you to a exclusive messenger thread to which we have practitioners and early adopters of Growing Young Adventists there. And you can ask those questions, or you can field those questions from your leaders and your young adults and provide them specific curated materials that is specific to their request. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so on 2 sides, number one, the free resources are available there. And I think that's beneficial because it doesn't come at any additional cost to you. Number 2, we have this messenger thread that gives us the intellectual capital of this shared group. They can say, hey, we tried this, or this is something that we did. And then further to that, which I will share with you, is I've accumulated over the past 2 or 3 years working in partnership with Fuller Youth Institute and shamelessly taking whatever they put on social media. I've developed what I call a super bundle.
Okay.
So there's materials there, not only from Fuller, but also as we at YG Church did a full series on Growing Young Adventists. I'm happy to download to you all of the materials there for your look. In fact, I actually transcribed one of the sermons to which a church, Miami Temple, I'm not sure if you're acquainted with them, with Lafitte Cortez in South Florida. He had his youth leaders literally preach those sermons verbatim from the transcript. So there's all kinds of resources that on first glance, you don't know where to look, and it's not helpful to see a page with 24 recommendations of free resources. But on the flip side of that, if you had the right person to ask, right, you say, hey, you know what, if you're doing a sermon series and you're doing it specifically, I had a pastor from Orange County, California yesterday say, hey, I'm doing something on prioritizing youth and young families everywhere, and I've preached on this particular passage already. Do you have some materials for me to utilize in taking a different angle, since I've already used that particular passage earlier? So I was able to provide him that referral, which you would not have been able to go through the hundreds of pages to find on your own. So know that we have those resources available to you. And then the part that I think is really key here is that your role as the youth director, specifically building those interdepartmental relationships, is really, really powerful. Because in my mind, the Growing Young Adventist, or the Growing Young model, is not only a great resource for local churches to deploy, but I can only imagine if it began to be modeled at the Ohio Conference amidst the different departments, working interdepartmentally, and then beginning to create opportunities for intergenerational types of and I recognize this is a little bit, how do I say it, manipulative, but looking for those photo ops to make it show, hey, we're not only trying to share with you what you should do in your church, this is what we're doing at the conference level, can be powerful imagery in regards to the church. I'll share with you one example, and then we'll get to your next question. A couple of years back, when my daughter was a senior in high school, I brought up this crazy idea to our conference president and administration, saying, hey, you know how there's job fairs and there's job shadowing happening for young people? I said, well, what if we had a day where we brought the seniors over there to learn what the Texas Conference does? They accepted the idea, and so I brought in about 3 dozen seniors from our academy, and lo and behold, it was incredible. They had their moving truck, the semi. Yeah. It was fully waxed and polished and open. It was in the front lawn, the front parking lot. And so the transportation department got to share what they do and how they do what they wear. these kids, these seniors went from department to department being wined and dined, if you will, by each of those departments.
Right.
They had candy and they had, souvenirs, and they had brochures in regards to what their department does and so forth and so on. Some of the most powerful imagery for me was, I have a couple of seniors that aren't going to be basically your scholarship winners, They went into the print shop and said, wow, we can work for the church and we don't have to be a pastor and we don't necessarily have to go to college, right? So the trade school kids were able to say, man, there's a place for me in the ministry of the church.
Yeah.
Further, what it made, for the Department of Education or the Department of Technology and so forth, it was wonderful because it gave the adults an opportunity to articulate how what they do is helping to fulfill the mission of the church.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last one, which still to this day, my conference president still talks about it, is that as these students would come in and they would visit the various areas, as they came into the president's office, a set of these students came together, laid hands on our president, and prayed for him.
Mm-hmm.
Still speaks about it to this day. But the beauty of that is that I was able to capture that. Yeah. I was able to capture pictures of the kids in the press room. I was able to capture the pictures of the semi, and they basically rolled out the red carpet for our seniors to come in to do a job shadow day. Okay. Right. And so the beauty of it, and especially with Kasper's spiritual gifts and expertise, capturing these and turning this into part of the story is really an encouragement that it's not just the youth department that can make a difference in young people's lives. Mm-hmm. It's the old guys in the print room, in the print shop that can make a difference in the lives of young people. And further, it's young people that can make a difference, what we call reverse mentoring. It's young people that can make a difference in the lives of our adults. Right. And so we all benefit from that. Well, let me have a word of prayer over you. When you send me the email, I'll send you what materials I have that may be relevant that come to my mind in addition to those names. But I'm super excited about what's developing here. Kasper, as Ed is getting used to the messenger thread, what helps us build momentum for the entire division is to hear what people are doing.
Yes.
And so I know some people have their own precautions or the reservations about Ben sharing everything that he's doing, but really that's where our momentum happens is when people are sharing. So please, Kasper, as Ed is getting acquainted with the group, share some of the plans and the excitement of what's going on here, because I think what you guys have is fabulous. I think it really is. So I'll pray over you right now, and like I said, if there's anything further that I can do or I can get you connected with, don't hesitate to ask. We don't have to Zoom every time. So
you can know that or an email,
whatever way. Unfortunately, Kasper knows any and every way to get in touch with me. So I'm never going to be rid of him. So it's all good. All right, let's pray. Lord God, I am so thrilled. I still remember working as a pastor alongside Ron in Florida Conference, and so just continue to see his enthusiasm to support young people being actively embraced in the local setting is exciting. I pray for Ed, and I certainly hear his heart, even in our short conversations at Kahada. There is so many things that you have in store for your church, and sometimes it feels like a very isolated silo. So I'm thrilled with the opportunities for us to break out of our silos and to make the Adventist Church the best place for young people to grow. I ask and pray upon Kasper. I've been so blessed with him over the years as he's been a part of our team at the seminary and has now moved into full work there at the Ohio Conference. Bless him and his bride. But right now, Lord God, I want to ask and pray specifically for the seeds that you're sowing in regards to our church growing young. May it fall on fertile soil there in Ohio Conference, in those places, Lord God, that it will sprout and it can potentially flourish. Please allow us the privilege and the honor to water and to fertilize and to till the soil, to make it as possible and as effective and as fruitful as possible for the sake of your glory. We ask and pray these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Allan, thank you so much for your time.